Charlie, how are we doing, my man?
Hello, Ross. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm going to borrow something from a friend who has a fellow podcast he has listeners across the ocean as well. So I'll say good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, depending where you are around the world. Whether we have people from around the world watching
That is
this,
true.
I don't know. But welcome to episode 8 of Talking Florida Rugby occasionally, or TFRO, as we like to call it. We have a legendary Florida coach who's going to be joining us a little bit. But first of all, you guys watched much rugby this weekend, Charlie? I think you watched a little bit of Super Rugby.
Yeah, last night I watched that first half. Always impressive. You know, I think the thing that most impresses me is just seeing people in the stands all tucked together. That's
right?
The most amazing thing.
It is a strange thing to be seeing right now. Obviously, Australia is still sort of social distancing, so they're kind of in pockets. I didn't get to watch any of the Australian stuff, but I watched Blues Hurricanes. I've yet to watch my Highlanders with that fantastic come from behind victory earlier this morning, but I'll perhaps watch that tomorrow. Before we get to our special guest, let's get to our 3 quick things. Again, not much news on the Florida side of things, obviously, other than increased COVID numbers that really are a pain to see because it just keeps meaning the delay of the start of the rugby season down here. Still no news on when that might be. Will be an interesting Monday will be an interesting day because the FHSAA, which is the governing body for high school sports, is going to announce their decision on what they're going to do with fall sports, or at least a temporary decision, and potentially high school football could be moved to the spring, which would be a bit of a knock, I should say, for high school rugby, in that a lot of those high school rugby players also play football. So hopefully they're just going to push the season back a little bit and see what happens. But we really don't want to see football being played in the spring because that would take a lot of rugby players out of it. On the USA Rugby side of the thing, we do have a bit of news though on the USA Rugby side. They provided a breakdown for what dues players will pay this year. It's going to be a base of $20 being charged by USA Rugby, but of course, obviously, that doesn't include your local dues, your what GU dues you may pay, your conference dues if you're in college. Apparently, it looks like club players will be. I think it was $35. $50 they used to pay overall.
Yeah.
This is with the insurance as well, but the high school and youth, they're still trying to kind of figure it out. But it looks like club players will end up paying about $14 or $15 less than they did previously. College, about the same amount. High school players, about $8 less. And youth players, it would go up a little bit of $2. And they haven't decided yet about the $160 per club registration fee. But at least some kind of news coming out about the whole insurance thing and registration with USA Rugby. So we're making some progress there. Also on the USA Rugby side of things, the youth and the high school organization, the governing organization, has been finalized. They've wrapped up their organizational revamp. They approved their 501c3 status and all sorts of things like that in a relationship with USA Rugby. They elected some new directors and some council members. The director for the Southeast region will be Kat Aversano. I'm not familiar with her. But yeah, it's good to see progress being made in that department because we obviously hadn't heard some news in quite a while out of USA Rugby.
Now we need progress on another front.
Right? Yeah, the numbers again. I think we set another record today in Florida, unfortunately. On the other side of things, on the world scale, the Olympics, which obviously were supposed to be this year, have been moved to next year. And they finalized the tournament schedule for rugby this week. It will run from July. The men's tournament will run from July 26th to July 28th next year, obviously in Japan. And the women's competition will follow up from that on July 29th through the 31st. There'll be 2 sessions each day, 8 p.m. Eastern. Here will be the following day there, and 11 p.m. Eastern as well. And then there'll be some morning sessions here as well at 3:30 a.m. and 6 a.m. So you can either get up early or stay up late to watch some Olympic rugby. Interesting thing is the women's champion will be crowned on Super Saturday, which is one of the biggest days in the Olympic tournament, in the Olympics overall, with a lot of track and field finals going on that day. So if you want to get your backside over to Japan and watch the Olympics next year, you can book your flights now. Hopefully, things will be sorted out by then. And our third thing to watch today, as Charlie has sort of made this childproof. New Zealand says, we'll say F off to South Africa and Argentina. They announced sort of their plans for Super Rugby in the future. It seems like Aotearoa has been a big success over there. And they're basically telling South Africa and Argentina that they don't want them part of Super Rugby anymore. It looks like New Zealand and Australia will sort themselves out competition-wise, perhaps 8 to 10 teams, with a lot of perhaps South African teams joining the Pro 14. Obviously, the Jaguars are kind of falling apart We've seen a lot of their players go to Europe, and even some of their lower players coming over to MLR. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with a lot of these Argentinian players in Pro 14s. A lot of travel for the South African teams. We've obviously seen 2 teams already do it from South Africa. So it can be done. So that's our 3 quick things for today. Before we get to our guest for this evening, which I know we got a lot of people on checking in to talk to this man or to hear from this man. You will be able to talk to him perhaps. We'll get to that in a second. But let's get to our gracious sponsors first, which have helped out our little podcast here. Our first one. Now, if you've played against or with Argentinian rugby players, which most of you in the South Florida area will have done, you will know they love their barbecue, and especially at the field, some churrasco, etc. And we have a friend of the program who his kids play for Key Biscayne Rugby, the Rats, and his name is Matthew Brothers, and he owns a barbecue company called Nuke, and his website is realfirebbq.com. Makes some serious barbecues direct from Argentina. They're made in Argentina, imported here. So you're going to pay a little more, but you'll get the product that you really pay for. They get some awesome barbecues. The products are all handcrafted with the highest quality metals and wood. So the most rigorous standards, long-lasting grill. That's the thing. We know when we go to some of those other stores that sell the cheaper barbecues, they may last a year, maybe 2 years if you're lucky in our conditions here. But these are some seriously constructed barbecues, and they allow for the serious cook to produce the best result for the meat ever. So check out Matthew Brothers' website. Again, realfirebbq.com.
And it's a great time. It's a great time to do barbecue because we spend more time at home. So why don't we just watch a short clip so we can show it instead of talking about it, which is much better. Okay.
Get our mouth watering, Charlie.
Exactly. Let's get everybody hungry. There you go.
Good look at exactly what you can do with those barbecues. You can heat up the veggies on the side there and throw that meat on the grill. In just a few minutes, you'll have some tasty meat. And of course, also sponsoring this evening, as we are interviewing a Fort Lauderdale legend, so it's only right that we have this gentleman sponsoring us, is Chris Ream at lifeinsuranceguy.com. If you ever want to know anything about life insurance or get a review on your current policy, Chris is your man. So check him out at lifeinsuranceguy.com. He knows everything there is to know about life insurance. You can get his email and phone number, contact info there. Again, lifeinsuranceguy.com.
And I have to say, Chris really wanted to be on this one to honor our guest. So thank you, Chris. And he's been a long-time supporter, and he's going to be a long time supporting because I won't let it go.
He's a good man. And this next gentleman we're going to talk to is also a very good man. Now, for those of you that don't know how long this gentleman has been involved, Charlie's going to post his resume in a second, but I think it's just about as long as I've been alive. I was born in 1976, and there's a quick look at it. This man's resume. This is obviously Kenny Simmons. As you can see, there's been involved with Florida rugby since the late 70s. And there's not many people still involved that can say that at this time. And we thank Kenny for joining us this evening, live from Gainesville, Florida.
There he is
with a lovely backdrop. One thing I'm going to ask you, Kenny, how many rugby T-shirts and jerseys have you had to throw away at any point in your rugby career? Because I've only been here for 25 years or so, and I think I've thrown away a dozen or so every year.
So it happened about 5 or 6 years ago when we had these camp at the start of practice, at the start of the season. We would I would bring all my T-shirts and jerseys and give them out to the guys that showed up and put up a good work for the weekend. And it took me about 4 or 5 camps to get down to where I've got a manageable number of T-shirts.
And how many jerseys do you have in your closet? And how much does the wife have to say about it?
Well, actually, that's just it. I don't anymore because of that. I have a few golden oldies and all that stuff. And this quilt that's behind me, my wife made for my 60th birthday.
Awesome.
And she used the one side is all the clubs that I played for and coached, and the other side are all the golden oldies tours that we've done. So it's got T-shirts and pictures and all that stuff from basically the history of my history of rugby of what stuff that she had.
I am pretty sure you have a storage with all your stuff out of your house.
No,
Your wife
like I
doesn't know about.
yeah. No, I was able to get rid of a lot of it. I really did. But I know a guy that has probably more storage. If you want some, I know a guy.
I'm sure you know plenty of guys, Kenny, with your
Yeah.
history in rugby, Florida rugby. Now, you didn't start playing rugby in Florida. Talk a bit to us about where you started playing rugby.
All right. So my last year at college at the University of Tennessee, my girlfriend told me about this sport that I might want to try out. And I went and tried it out. And by the end of that semester, she was sorry. I think she was sorry I took it up because it consumed me. So I was a Tennessee volunteer rugby player. That's why I learned how to play rugby and fell in love with the game. 1972 to 1973.
Awesome. Now, obviously, Knoxville, big rugby town. And I'm not sure if everybody kind of knows how big rugby is in Knoxville. Obviously, UT has been a quality rugby program for decades now, and especially the youth rugby there. I remember when I lived there for a year total in 03 and 04, and youth rugby wasn't even down here yet, and it was massive already. Right. Up in Knoxville, they were building facilities, just for the youth themselves, the Possums, the men's side there, and I know the women's side has done very well as well over the last few years. So you said you came to visit Gainesville. You said initially.
Yeah, we were actually in with the University of Tennessee. We came down and played in a tournament in '73. So that was my visit to Gainesville, and it was a good experience. So something that we don't see, most clubs don't get to go to, are these old tournaments, the 2-day tournaments that are good, big, a lot of rugby and good social events. But it was we came down. They put us up in a dorm actually.
Oh, nice.
For the first night, and then this guy named Dan Marvel from the University of Florida invited us to stay at his parents' ranch. So awesome. Our whole team went out and stayed out there. Turns out he's still involved with the club when I started coaching here 40 years later.
Wow, yeah, no, obviously the Gators have an amazing alumni base and have a great alumni event every year. They celebrated their big anniversary, didn't they, recently?
Yes, we had our 50th in 2019, February 2019.
Awesome. I'm obviously involved in the FAU rugby alumni side of things. We're 20 years behind you guys, but we're getting there.
Yeah. And now, Tennessee's on their 50th this year. So I joined them. They were about 2 years old when I had played with Tennessee.
Awesome. Well, hopefully they can still get to celebrate that regardless of the situation at the moment here. Now, obviously you ended up in Fort Lauderdale. Tell us how that move happened.
So graduated college, got a job in Fort Lauderdale. And then I was a lost, wayward wanderer for a while with no rugby. I tore my knee up, had to have some surgery, and never even really thought about it until a friend of mine from college moved down in January of '77, or he moved down a little bit before that. And we found out Boca had a rugby club.
Oh, yes.
So we went to Boca and played in the B game. I actually played prop. My first game in Florida was prop for the Boca B side against the Smugglers.
All right. The Smugglers. Tell us who the Smugglers are, because not everybody knows a little bit about the history of the Smugglers.
So the Smugglers was a team that broke off, I think, from Miami and probably took some people from the Tridents. And they were a very physical team, a really small group of players, but tough, played hard, a little bit dirty. And anytime you played them, you felt it for days. But they were a good group. All of them were good groups of guys, so we really had a good time.
Awesome. So you played in that Boca B game, and then
played in that Boca B game, and then that week after that one game there, we saw an ad in the paper about Fort Lauderdale. We said, well, that's closer to home, so we went and joined up with the Fort Lauderdale team that had just started up the same season.
Gotcha.
And played with them and stuck with them because that was so much closer to home.
Yeah, maybe we'll talk a little bit about marketing down the road here. Is finding out about rugby clubs in newspapers almost seems like an ancient time, but that was pretty much the only way back then, right? That and flyers.
That flyers and bumper stickers. Bumper stickers worked well. We found that to be a good.
Interesting. So talk a little about, you were obviously at Fort Lauderdale for, I think, almost 3 decades, or 2 decades, excuse me, totally 4 decades, but 2 decades in Fort Lauderdale. Talk about, first we'll talk about the rugby scene when you came down here. How many teams were there, and where did Fort Lauderdale play? And And what was the quality of rugby?
Right.
Obviously, you played a little bit in Tennessee.
Yeah, so rugby was pretty disorganized back then. In fact, there was a Florida Rugby Union, but there were nothing was scheduled. Basically, we had to do our own scheduling. We would have a meeting. The Florida Rugby Union would have a meeting twice a year, and we'd schedule all the games. But in Miami, we had the two teams at the time. Smugglers might have just started. Orlando had there were two clubs in Orlando.
Yeah.
Boca had a club that was brand new with us. And then Jacksonville had a club that had been around quite a while. Tallahassee, which was long haul. Tampa had USF. Back then, the college clubs and the men's clubs were all intermingled. There were no rules about who had to play. So UF was a viable team, but they had a lot of graduates and non-students playing. So we would make up our schedules. Brevard was around. We'd make up our schedules and just go travel and play around the state. And there were no playoffs, nothing like that, no fine, nothing, no rules really. And it was amazing. Everybody showed up at every game. We played B games even if we only had 16 players, because back then there were no subs when I first started. So if we had a 16th player, if you didn't play a B game, he didn't get to play.
Wow.
So we played a lot of games.
So it was just sort of pick up the phone and call another team and say, hey, we're coming up on this date and we'll see you there at this field on this time. And
you schedule the games. The home team would have to find a referee, which that was a challenge. So no telling who you got for a referee. I would say back in those days, there was no certification for referees, no certification for coaches or anything like that. And there were some pretty ugly games back in those days.
just whoever happened to have a whistle in their bag on the day and was around, right?
That's true. But fortunately, you had guys like Bill Potter, Dick Elliott, Terry Day came around a little bit a few years later, but we were able to get some quality referees, and you'd always try and get them for the big games.
For sure. Now, where did Fort Lauderdale play at the time?
We played at Holiday Park.
Okay, still around, obviously, now on Sunrise.
It's still around, and back then it was the tennis. They had a big tennis complex there that was run by Chris Everett's dad. She was playing. She was at the top of her game then. And after some of our games, you'd go out there and you could watch her practice. And some of the visiting teams from up north really enjoyed that.
I can imagine.
But the advantage of living – yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Kenny.
I was going to say the advantage of living in Fort Lauderdale were the number of college teams that would come down for spring break and want to play rugby, and the touring sides that would come in. So we didn't just play teams in Florida. We got to play teams from all over the country and actually all over the world when it came down to it, because the tours that came through were just tremendous.
Yeah, we haven't seen as much of that over the last few years.
Yeah,
Now, it leads nicely into my next topic, which is obviously Spring Break and Ruggerfest, which I think, if I'm right, started just about when you started at Fort Lauderdale. And how much? So, when did you start? Talk a bit about how you got involved in Ruggerfest over the years.
Okay, so first when the founders of the club, so Bill Johnstone, Captain Bly, Keith Lawrence. I don't know if you know, it's Toby Lawrence's dad from in Fort Lauderdale. Yeah, he was the coach. And a guy named Norm Thompson was the ringleader of the club. But they started the club, and we'd played 2 or 3 games, and they said, you know what, we're going to have a tournament. We're going to host a tournament. So in our first season we started in January, and by spring break, we decided to host a tournament. Now, I didn't get to play for Fort Lauderdale. I had to play for Iowa. And those poor guys were burnt to hell. But but we had a good time. And the tournament, I don't even remember who won the first tournament, but it wasn't Fort Lauderdale, because we were still struggling to win games back in those days.
So again, back then it was just a case of calling clubs all over the country and just sort of word of mouth and finding out about
it. Yeah, exactly.
How many teams did you have? How many teams did you have that first year? You remember?
I think we had 6, maybe 8 teams, and then a couple years later, I mean, because we had that was really good. And then there were a couple of seasons that we really struggled. We were having 6 guys show up at practice, and all we do is and so we would just do with no coach. So we just do 3-on-3 live scrimmage for 2 hours. And so the end of the day, when we'd get 15 guys for the games, we got to where we could tackle like crazy. We just didn't know what the hell to do when we got the ball. But then we came on to so I think it was 79 Ruggerfest. Nothing had happened. We were 2 weeks away from when it was supposed to happen. And little man, Mike Resta, was the president of the club. And he said, we're having it. We're going to make this happen. And to me, that was a turning point because he was so determined to make it happen. We found 6 teams to come. We found 5 teams plus ours to come play, put together a tournament, made it happen. And then we vowed from then on it would get bigger and better, which is what we did.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you were there during some of the heydays of the Fort Lauderdale Ruggerfest, and talk a bit about how important spring break was. I mean, obviously Fort Lauderdale at that time was a massive spring break location. Since then, the city's sort of cut down, and I think that may have aligned a little bit, with the decline of Ruggerfest.
Yeah, spring break was huge. We would get it was incredible. Teams would call up; they want to come down and play a game. So I don't know. It was about the early '80s. We were just killing ourselves because we were playing all these teams, and finally we came up with the idea of what if we set them up to play each other, and we made arrangements. So what we did was we got the word out through Rugby magazine was the way you get the word out to the clubs back then.
Right.
It was print magazine that went out, and that was really the only tool we had. But we would get clubs from all over the country, and we try and schedule matches with. And we had one guy, Norm Thompson, that I mentioned. He reffed every game. He didn't work. So he was able to ref every game. And there was one day we had 10 teams, we had 5 games back-to-back starting at Holiday Park. They'd give us $50 each, and then we'd set them up with a game on Tuesday and Thursday and send them over to the Duck Soup for their after-game social. And but we had 5 games in one day like that. So,
wow, so Ruggerfest was more than just a 1 or 2 day tournament back in the day.
Yeah, I mean, we still had our tournament. That was the one thing, but the true Ruggerfest was really all the teams that were coming in and playing. And the way we organized it, which because you didn't have social media, we actually would put the schedule on my voice machine, on my on the recorder.
Your answering machine, yeah.
Yeah, the answering machine. So they'd call up and they would have to get the schedule on it, and like I said, they showed up. Everybody showed up. We didn't have this, I didn't know about it and I couldn't make it, and all that. And there was nothing but playing the game, but everybody showed up.
Awesome, just playing for the love of the game. Well, hopefully Ruggerfest gets back. I know, obviously, had a bit of trouble over the last few years or so with one year almost getting cancelled, and then scrambling at the last minute. And obviously, we've got some other tournaments either side of it that have taken some clubs away from it. But hopefully, we get to see Ruggerfest back to somewhat of an elite tournament around the USA. Now, before I get to it's the rest of your Fort Lauderdale, I want to invite anybody who is watching that Charlie's going to post a link in the comments that you'll be able to join the chat a little later on if you have any nice words or stories about Kenny. So Charlie's going to post that link, and if you have a phone, an iPad, or a tablet, or a laptop, or any kind of computer, you can just click on that link and join us in the chat later. We're allowed, I think, 10 in the waiting room at once. We can get 6 in at a time. So maybe we'll turn this into a big party later. So Charlie's going to post that.
Sounds good.
In the comments on Facebook and YouTube. But yeah, before we get to your next stage, talk about the success you had at Fort Lauderdale. I mean, that was obviously you obviously helped turn them into a powerhouse.
Well, so what happened is around the mid '80s, we were playing, we were struggling. We'd gone through 4 or 5 coaches. We never fired a coach, but we couldn't get a coach to stay with us. We became the uncoachables. So we was trying to figure out what to do. And I was in my mid 30s, and I was thinking, I could bust my butt to be on the A side, or I could try and do something that'll help the club get better and let these younger guys get in. So I kind of switched to coaching. And I can tell you, coaching your peers is a very difficult challenge. It's a huge challenge.
Yes.
The first few practices, why do we have to do that? You never did that. You didn't do it that way, and all that stuff. So, but we struggled with it. And then what happened was Mike Hayden, our captain, got involved. He and I started getting involved. We started filming the games. And once we filmed the games, we would show them at the, of course, the old VHS heavy-duty cameras. We'd show the game at the bar afterwards. And then Mike and I would spend the whole first 40 minutes, 80 minutes of the social. He and I were sitting there analyzing the game and figuring out what we're going to do for practice over the next 2 weeks. And eventually got the club to want to play serious. Up until then, we'd just been playing for fun, want to play our games, but we weren't really, we didn't have a vision or a plan to build and get better until, again, with the help of Mike Hayden as the captain, we started putting things together, and the guys just bought into it. The whole thing is you get the guys to buy into the program and it'll work.
Yep, all starts at the top. We've seen several clubs have success without even almost a full-time coach, and there's still teams out there now that have player coaches. And if you all buy into it, you can get it going and even take it as far as a national championship. Yeah. All right. Before we get, so you obviously had a great time. I think you said you had 8 out of 9 state championships from the late 80s through the early 90s with Fort Lauderdale.
Something like that. It's I'm going to full disclosure. Some of my memory may not be what it's supposed to be. So some of
I don't blame you. There's a lot to remember.
But we had a good run. We got the 1 year we didn't make it in our streak was we lost to Boca. And one
of the best rivalries in the state.
Yeah,
still to this
day. It was a good one. We lost to Boca, and it was a heartbreaker because it was a game that I felt we should have won, and we all felt we should have won. But hats off to Boca for giving it a go. Problem was we get to the regionals, Group 4 regionals, which is the next step to the nationals, and about half the time we get past New Orleans, which we would wind up playing in the first round,
right?
And then we'd have to play Life. And
there's a story for a lot of people. Yes.
Yeah, or it was Old White, or it was the Atlanta Renegades. It was each of those clubs we got knocked out by. A couple of them were really close games, but we never could get past that Group 4 regional in Fort Lauderdale.
Gotcha. Now, obviously, in '96, talk about what led you to move over to the west coast of Florida.
Well, FPL had they were cutting back, had a cutback, and I got bought out. I worked for Florida Power and Light for 20 years, and basically was offered a package not to go to work.
Right.
So I fudged around for a while, and then found a job in Fort Myers, and went over there. And right before I went over there, I went to a coaching clinic and ran into a guy named Larry Fox who was coaching the Naples club. And we wound up rooming at the tournament, got to know each other a little bit, but then wound up moving over there. But I didn't have any way to get in touch with him or anything like that. But we moved over to Fort Myers, and the first Tuesday night there was, I went looking for a rugby field, and I looked around. I said, "Hey, this looks like a good place for practice." And sure enough, that's where they were, because he kind of described where they were.
Gotcha.
So I found them. And lo and behold, he was their coach, but he had some work issues come up where he couldn't coach for a while, and it kind of slid right in there. And there I was the outside expert, so the guys listened a little better. But these guys were they were hard working. There was a good group of guys there. We had another good run. Eventually, it took us a few years.
Well, before we get a little deeper into the Naples side of things, Charlie, I think you had somebody who had to say a few words pre-recorded for us. I think we have a few people that actually sent some stuff, and let's get to the first one before we get to
Coach Ken. Thank you for everything you've done for this team, for me individually as well. I learned so much rugby in the last year-ish that I've started playing. I came onto the field, onto the team, not having known anything. And you have been very accepting and willing to teach me everything that I know right now. I still have so much to learn, and I look forward to learning from you and from some of the more experienced guys on the team. It sucks that I'm out for a little while now because of my knee, but I look forward to being out there with you guys again soon. Gatorcock on 3.
Hey, Coach. Just want to say thank you for everything you've done for me over the past years. Just want to say that you changed my life, both as a player and as a person. You made me really want to get into coaching, and now that I'm starting my coaching career, I hope that one day I change as many lives as you did with us. And I hope that you continue coaching for many more, because you're the rock of Florida rugby. Take care. Love you as always.
I'm Matt McGee. I had the privilege of playing under Coach Ken from about 2009 to 2013, and then I got to coach with him as well for a little bit when I ran out of eligibility. Ken was a phenomenal coach, great at teaching the game. We had a lot of success under him when I served as president of the club in an undergrad role. We went to the CRC multiple times. We won the inaugural SEC championship. So he obviously taught me a ton about the game of rugby, but I think more importantly, he kind of taught things outside of the game. And this could be seen just from the way he's still continued to stay active in the lives of all the players. Whether that's being at funerals, weddings, graduations. I think he really taught us all kind of how to carry yourself in life, and I think that speaks a whole lot more about him than just what he does with the game of rugby. So, Ken, thank you very much for everything you've taught me over the years, and I definitely owe you a beer whenever this COVID stuff is over with.
Some nice words from some current and former Gators. We'll get to your Gator career in a bit. I will blame Charlie for the music in that. Kenny is still fully alive, as you can see on the camera here. the music behind those guys might have suggested otherwise. But listen, Charlie does great work behind the scenes. But just like me, he screws up now and again. Not a big deal. But yeah, great words there, including from Lucas Bystracki, one of the most decorated players to play for UF. Obviously went on to play for USA South and now involved with Rugby Atlanta and their 404 development program. As obviously said, they're trying to get into coaching. I know he's getting into some personal training as well, doing very well up in Atlanta is Lucas. But let's get into back to a Naples and Fort Lauderdale connection. Charlie, if you can bring our next guest in, let you do some actual producing other than putting funeral music. And that would be Paul Ricella. Paul Ricella, current Naples, I think you're assistant coach, Paul, right, at the moment?
I'm just a general help around there, just throwing whatever I can in to help the club. I'm probably best known as a good club man than anything, so I'll do whatever it takes. So.
Well, yeah, talk about your Fort Lauderdale and Naples connection with Kenny. Talk about how you met. You had a good story about how you first met, and talk about playing for him and coaching as well.
Yeah, my time with Kenny. G'day, Kenny, for a start.
Hey. Cheers.
My time was really split between two areas through initially with Fort Lauderdale. I think it was in the, if I remember, late 80s, Kenny.
So, yes. Yeah.
I think. We were on a tour I was playing in London at the time and was on a tour with a team called the London Merry Wanderers. Purely a social New Zealand team, and we were on a southern tour of the States, and Fort Lauderdale was part of it. We had a wonderful tour, had a wonderful time in Fort Lauderdale, and Kenny's Fort Lauderdale team was the only team that beat us during that tour, and at the time we were really impressed by Fort Lauderdale and obviously the social and just the general club atmosphere that they had. So, which was really part of, a big part of Kenny and little man at the time as well too. So, so I went back to London and finished what I was doing there finished the season there that I was on. I met a girl at the time during this tour as well too, which is 31 years later, still my wife, and ended up wrote Kenny a letter at the time, which is what we did, and he said, "Yeah, come on over, come on over, and we'll see what we can do." So I showed up, got straight from off the plane, hopped on a bus, from Miami showed up at a bus stop, and Kenny showed up to pick me up. He said, "Oh yeah, no problem, I'll pick you up." He had a minivan packed full of rugby players, or 2 minivans if I remember, and proceeded to take me or drive me up to Tallahassee from there. So immediately, and packed me in with these guys. I traveled all the way up there and had a great time. Never played a minute up there because I understood the way that if you don't practice, you don't play. Kenny and I were totally in agreement that that's what you do, and we ever since then we started a kind of many years of love and affection, if you like.
Yep.
Awesome. Can you talk about what kind of player Paul was?
Well, that was probably my biggest coaching mistake of my career, was not letting Paul play in that tournament. He single-handedly, I mean, his impact alone, even without knowing our players, probably would have been could have been a championship for us. Paul's one hell of a player, and Sevens, he just it gives him a chance to really show his stuff. The problem I have with Paul is he likes to pick the biggest guy on the team and run into him. And Paul was, what were you weighing? What, 165, 170?
Yeah, 170. Around there, yeah.
Skinny little shit. Oh, excuse me. Skinny little guy, and he's going and well, he kind of lead with his elbow a little bit to make it a little tough on the guy. But if there was a big guy running and a flanker's got him in his sights, Paul would beat him to it, take him out as a fly half. I said, look, you're a fly half. We don't need you to be physical. I need you to get the ball out and get out there and follow. But that was the only thing I had with Paul. He was too determined to take on the big guys. But one heck of a player, and as he said, he's a club man all the way. He will support the club. If we needed to play somebody, to give somebody some time and experience, and it wasn't really going to impact the game, Paul wasn't one to say, no, you can't. I got to play. He would do whatever's best for the club, period.
That's awesome. And when did you guys hook up again on the West Coast?
It was in the early. Oh no, I'm not sure.
I moved over in '96. Actually, you came over right about the same time, real soon after that, because I was still in that first place.
Yeah, just after that. So, getting back to Fort Lauderdale, we won 2 of those state championships, if I remember, and it was a big change, and there might have been some of the 2 early ones, if I remember, right before you went on a big run. So, a lot of that was just really, us working together to try and change the mindset of players of how what it takes to win. So we both knew how to do it, but it was kind of a joint effort of how to learn how to win.
It's a process.
Yeah.
The whole thing. It's a process, and you just have to remember it's a process. You can't worry about it. That's one of the things when you're talking with the players and they say, well, I just want to win. So, well, what's that definition of winning? Because we could win if we play a high school team, but what good is that? You got to work on building the process to get there. And it takes, you don't get there overnight.
And the process started with changing it the way that we practiced. And right there, it's ironic. The harder you practice, the harder you work, the better you get. And our team all of a sudden started to recognize that. And from 8 at training, it'd be, we had some really big numbers at training, and the competition increased, and and the standard of play increased. So we were proud of that. And it's interesting. Through the years, people think of me as a Naples player, and I am. I am a proud Naples player. But my time started in Fort Lauderdale for 2 years there. So, and I love that club. Great club.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Talking about some of the differences between the Fort Lauderdale rugby scene and the Naples rugby scene. Obviously, Naples, I'm not sure if we had divisions at that point, but I know most of the time you were coaching there, they were Division 3 and ended up coming up to Division 2 when you had a real successful run at the end there. But how was the Naples scene, rugby scene, compared to Lauderdale when you got over there?
Well, I can tell you, I'll give you an example of it was a little bit tough because that first year, we did. It was again not huge numbers, and Larry Fox had come out when he could to coach. And I'll never forget one day the day I decided to check the mileage from my house to the field, it was 40 miles. Oh, I thought, man, I was kind of depressed, getting tired. It's just one of those days. I get there, and the only other person that showed up to practice that night was Larry Fox.
Oh, wow.
Who was the other coach. And so this was before Paul moved over, I think.
We still have the same problems today that we had back then, basically.
Right, yeah. So it was a very similar thing. But eventually it's like, you lose the games. And the biggest thing is when players realize if they come to practice and work hard, they'll get on the field. They'll start doing that. If you sit there and you say, well, I've got this really good player, like Paul's a player you'd want on the field no matter what. But if he doesn't come to practice and we put him on the field, that might work for a game or two, but eventually that kills the club.
Yep, 100%.
And Paul understood it because he had wound up getting some work commitments and had to slow down. And we'd bring him in when we needed. But when all the players understood that, then everybody shows up, they're committed, and they keep coming. And I don't remember what years it was, but I'll never forget one year. We won one game against Sarasota, and they were talking about how great a coach I was because they said if it weren't for your coaching, we wouldn't have won that one game. That was Travis Purse.
Paul, go ahead, Kenny.
You just go for it. You keep working. You got to work hard if you want to.
There's definitely a difference between a club and a team, and obviously the coach can have a big impact on that. Paul, talk about Kenny as a coach. What kind of coach was he, or still is? I assume he's still pretty much the same, even though he's coaching college kids now.
Well, he was instrumental also in getting me over to Naples. So through Peter Roberts at the time, I was on the other coast, or actually up in Cocoa Beach area, and what happened was, we were having a tough time. My wife and I had moved back after going back to New Zealand for 7 years, and Kenny had been in touch with Peter Roberts, and who was another long-time Naples coach and one of the originals. And then I got a phone call from Peter Roberts saying, I've got a job over here in the field that I'm in. I'm a construction guy, and the only thing is that you have to come back and play. And I was relatively retired at that stage, and Kenny, I know, was in the background just starting that up, So look, Kenny's a wonderful coach because he's a player's coach, and I think as coaches, if you think about just this, to be talked about as a player's coach means that you have the ability to communicate with your players, to talk them through certain things that they need to be. And he, in that sense, he's more of a teacher. Believe me, I've seen him pretty upset at me a few times. So, and again, it's, I've come from a background where you always try something. You're never afraid not to try something. However, a few times that crossed the line with Kenny, and as a player, I shut my mouth, listened to him, and respected him totally. He's one of the best. I've played for a lot of coaches, a lot of good coaches, and Kenny's right up there. So, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously two main parts of coaching rugby. There's the tactical side of things, and there's obviously the man management side of things. And not all coaches get both sides right, but obviously Kenny is somebody that's done that. Now, Kenny, talk about towards the end of your Naples career, the real success you had there at the end. Winning the D3 championship a couple of times, then South champs for D3, and then go into the D2 national playoffs back in 2007. Talk about that time with the club.
Yeah, so that was about the time Paul finally did retire. So that hurt us a little bit, but then we were fortunate when Pat O'Donnell decided to come to help us out, since he was living here and had been playing for Miami, but his commute was killing him. But and Larry Fox was a lot more available to coach. But we just started getting it together, and we've got. It's about numbers. You got to have the numbers where you can start. You got to have 30 something players that are really committed if you want to have one good side to go out there. And so we went the first year. We made it to the South Championship. We made it to the final. Battleship beat us, knocked us out of the running. So we had to go try it the next year. And when we finally made it, we wound up going out to Sacramento for the Elite Eight in D3, and we played BA Baracus. And this was a lesson to me. We were winning 31-0. There was absolutely nothing we could do wrong. Right near the end of the first half, they scored a try. They might have scored 2 there at the end. But, those kind of numbers, you don't really realize it. We pulled out our best player because we pulled Steve Dutton out, which he wanted to come out. His ankle was weak, and we wanted to make sure we had him for the championship. But that shouldn't have mattered because we had 25 people there.
Right.
And we lost that game 39-31.
Oh, wow.
And I have trying to rack my brain for whatever it was I said at halftime, because I figured it had to be the worst halftime speech ever given. But
we see it happen all the time. You get a little comfortable with that lead, and as a rugby player, you can't turn off.
Yeah, we think another contributor, going back on it, was in Sacramento. It was really dry, a little bit high air altitude.
Right.
And we weren't prepared with the hydration. You don't even realize you're sweating. We're down here used to playing this stuff, and we were probably just didn't. I started thinking about my throat being parched, but it was a lesson I learned on making sure you're keeping everybody hydrated, because we just weren't hitting on all cylinders that second half. It was hard.
That's quite ironic, though, that Kenny, through all the wins that he's had, he remembers the losses. He doesn't. He barely remembers the wins, but he, as a coach, he's holding on to still remembers the things that he could have done better, which is absolutely brilliant.
Those losses are the ones that tend to stick in your mind, don't they? Especially when you've done as much winning as Kenny has over the years.
Yeah.
Well, Paul, I appreciate you joining us before I get on to the next step in his career. Any last words for Kenny?
No, just I love you and Naoma. Always in our hearts, mate. Cheers.
Tell Susie hello for me.
Same.
Appreciate it, Paul. All right, before we get into our next segment, again, if you want to join us and have some words for Kenny, Charlie posted the link on Facebook and YouTube. Just click on that link from any browser, Chrome preferably on any device, and you can join us here at the end. We'll get everybody together at the end who wants to come in and say a few words. Now, obviously, we talked about your success on the field. You also had some success as a board member of the FRU. How did that come about? And talk about that period and some of the things you got accomplished, especially All Florida Day. I know was sort of one of the things you got going.
Right. Well, the Brad Hannaford, he's passed on, but he was a name from the past that he got me involved with the Florida Rugby Union. I became a board director to the South for representing Florida, and did that for a few years and got a feel for the politics of rugby, which
yes.
Absolute hate. We had at the time, I think Bingtown might have been our president. He was being president for the club, president of the union for quite a few years, and was had done a good job. But after 10 years, when somebody's at any position for 10 years, it's just you need to change. So after Bing, there were some other folks involved, and I wasn't really happy with what was going on. We were winding in debt. We were struggling with our relationship with the South, and I was just getting extremely frustrated. And that's when my wife said, "Why don't you do something about it?" And so I ran for president and wound up getting a really good committee. I had Mark E2 as vice president, Carrie O'Malley as our secretary. Of course, she was the workhorse of our committee. Don't let anybody fool you.
Yeah, was Carrie now the president of the union? Yeah.
and we had Gerard Ferraris, that was our treasurer. And what we did was, back then their meetings were still 2 days. We got up there and got a big easel out and had everybody in the meeting tell us what they wanted out of the union, because we weren't serving the union anymore. The leaders were doing the best they could, but they were doing based on their thoughts. So what we did was we said, well, okay, what do you guys want? And for hours, everybody went through, and it was really good participation. We just had a long list, and then we went back and just started picking away at what their complaints were, what they wanted to do, and it really helped give us guidance on what we needed to do to get things going. And first, we had to work on the money, had to work on credibility, and it worked. We had, like I said, we had a really good staff, and then the clubs were very responsive, and I think we restructured our leagues according to what they wanted, and came up with trying to have at least an event once a year that would bring everybody together. Mm-hmm. So selectors could see the players could meet each other and all that stuff. And way back when, we were doing a lot of them at, we did them at the, Tampa had started it, I think, for the Gasparilla Fest. Gasparilla. Okay. So what we did was we scheduled all the league matches in Tampa. They set up the fields, and they set us up a place close to the festival. And we got a good response. A few complaints about why am I sacrificing a home game to go play in Tampa?
I understand.
But overall, and it's understandable. But when we explained what was going on, and then we said, okay, I'll tell you what, in the fall, we'll do it down South Florida so that the South Florida teams don't have to travel. So we did one at Halloween in Fort Lauderdale, and that worked out really well. So it was all a good. The All Florida Day is something that I've always enjoyed. Thought it was a great event, and then we kept going it different ways, called different things. Corky Newman hosted it many times at the Coco Expo.
Oh yeah, remember those days?
Yeah, so we'd bring all the teams there, and a lot of times we'd go in there and we'd have our select side trials on Sunday, which wasn't a great success. Players might have had a little bit too much fun or out a little bit too late on Saturday night.
Right.
It gave us gave the coaches a chance, and any player that said that the All-Stars were rigged and whatever, it was their own fault because they didn't show up or weren't ready to perform. But we gave everybody an opportunity. It wasn't just, okay, I'm going to select you, you, and you. We let everybody give it a go. And so at least we tried to be fair about it.
Yeah, Florida Day was a big success for a while, and then it kind of vanished away a little bit. And obviously, with the schedule kind of shrinking to just in the spring, and a lot of teams didn't really want to play in the fall. But I know there was talk before this season kind of got put on hold, or the upcoming season got put on hold, or however we want to call it for the moment. But talk about bringing it back this year, and I think perhaps it would be an awesome way to get things going again when we do get clear, to have everybody back in one place and just realizing what we missed. Yeah, no, it's an awesome thing. Although we haven't been able to go to the version that they've had recently because of the scheduling issues with the colleges. We're all different, but it's been good. We've had a lot of good opportunities to see everybody. Well, it's great for the referees too. You get a chance for evaluators to look at referees all at one time and not have to travel around the state. And hopefully we'll get it back going in the next season. Let's talk about the next point in your career. But Charlie, do you have another couple of videos to play for us before we get into the Gator side of things?
Just want to thank Coach Ken for 5 great years at the University of Florida, taking the team to the Elite Eight and playing in the CRC under Coach Ken were some of the highlights of my career with him.
Hey Ken and everybody, my name is Gabriel. I was on the team for the 2018, 2019, and what there was of a 2020 season. And thinking about my time playing rugby at UF, really can't think about it without thinking about our head coach Ken. The man's experience and knowledge is just boundless, and I really realized that when I helped him move my sophomore year of college and my first year on the team, and all of the rugby memorabilia he had something to say about, some story to tell about everything. And the amount of advice that I've gotten from Ken, both on and off the field, and both advice that I wanted and needed and advice that I didn't want but needed, I still use to this day. So Ken, I hope you're doing well and staying safe, and I hope you're finally taking it easy, not having to watch all of us run around on the field.
Hey Coach, how's it going? It's Connor.
Tim.
And we're up in Jersey, but wishing we were on the pitch right now down in Gainesville.
Absolutely.
We want to congratulate you on all your accomplishments.
Congrats, Coach.
And just being a fantastic coach to not only us, but people throughout all the years. You've really shown us what the game is, and now we both love it so much. So we just wanted to reach out and say congratulations. And we hope this is a nice little surprise for you. We're going to definitely be listening on the podcast, but go Gators.
Go Gators.
Always repping it.
Thanks, Coach.
Thank you, Coach.
Good job.
We appreciate you. We'll see you.
Some nice words there from some Gators, again, former and current. Now, so after just over a decade of time in Naples, talk about how you ended up sort of in the third corner of the state. You haven't quite reached Jacksonville yet, but let's talk about your time, how you ended up in Gainesville and your time with the UF. With UF.
Once again, I don't know, I had a trend going, but my job decided to buy me out and give me a chance to move on to better things. So they gave me a little package and gave me a chance to regroup, and eventually landed a job up in Gainesville. What's funny about the trip to Gainesville was Larry Fox, who I mentioned from Naples, when I was in Naples, they took a team down to Cuba.
Oh, wow.
And one of the guys that went to Cuba was Dave Anastas, a.k.a. Boot.
Oh, yep.
He was going to school at the University of Florida. So he went on the tour, and Larry and I helped Larry coach him up and get these guys ready to go to Cuba. But then when they went after the trip and everything, UF didn't have a coach, and they were getting Larry to coach him by email. So we had a game in Tampa, and Larry said, "Hey, when we go after this, you want to go up there?" So we wound up going from Tampa to Gainesville and did a 4-hour session with these guys. So these guys, a group of guys with no coach, they've been getting their butts kicked. They're the only team in Florida that would play in D1. So they're playing Tennessee, Clemson, all those clubs, getting beat 100-something to nothing. But I never saw a group of guys that were more committed than that group than we had for that practice. And after the practice, it was like it was a good recharge, because it was just so much fun. For 4 hours, we worked with them just on basic stuff. And I had no idea at the time that I was going to be going to Gainesville. And about 6 months later, I got a job up there, called them up, and they said, "Yep, we don't have a coach. We need you. Come show up." I was there about a month, and Gary Byrne and his dad Tony, this old guy, comes up to him and says, "My, this is awkward. My son here has just moved over here to coach the University of Florida." and Gary said, "Oh no, just go on do what you're doing. I just got off the plane. Just do what you're doing." So we finished up that session, and then talked to them a little bit, and then we tried. I was talking to the captain. He had been talking to the president. Apparently, they weren't talking to each other, or if they were, they weren't telling us about it. And we're asking, "Well, what's going on here? What do you want? What do you want?" And they just kind of laughed and ran away. So Gary and I just looked at each other and invited them over for dinner. There might have been some Guinness involved, but
of course.
we kind of sorted out a plan and actually co-coached Florida for quite a few years, and basically helped turn it around. So it wasn't just me. It's always a team to bring things around. So between Gary and I and the leadership of the club, within a couple of years, we had them turned around like you wouldn't believe.
Yeah, looking at some of the stats, and you gave me a link, I think he was sort of 4 and almost 22 in those first 5 years, and then come into 08 and really turn that team around. Talk about some of the success you had with that team. I know we saw a photo there from CRC, so I know you've obviously gone on to national playoffs as well.
Right, yeah. So yeah, so I'll talk about the CRC first, because that happened just because of being the University of Florida. We got the call. They're trying to do is line up some big name teams.
Right.
And we got a call, said, "How would you like to come up and play in this tournament in Philadelphia?" Or not? That was Columbus. First one was in Columbus. I said, "Well, we'd love to, but I just don't see how we can afford it." I said, "No, it's all paid for." Oh,
Thank you very much.
Let me get back to you, but I'm sure we'll do that. So they flew us up, 12 players, coach, manager, and a trainer. They let us go up there, and we didn't do so well the first year. We lost. They were all close. We surprised the heck out of everybody. We really didn't know much about sevens, but they were so invested. They actually sent somebody from the next sevens Eagle to come down and work with us, John Hinken. He worked with us for a weekend, did a 2-day camp. Unfortunately, we lost one of our players that weekend in a boating accident. So it's kind of tough, but we got through it and played for him, played for Curtis Shepard. And we were invited back the next year. We wound up playing in 3 of them, I believe. And we won we actually played the very first game of the tournament, and we played the first one that was televised.
Awesome.
And so they had us play Tennessee, my old school. That was the big match with us against Tennessee, but we just couldn't beat them.
Awesome. Now talk about we had our referee podcast a few weeks ago, and obviously 3 of those referees went to Florida. Only one was coached by you in Khalil Harrison. Talk a bit about Khalil and just how the amount of referees that have come out of Florida, out of the Gators system. It's amazing.
Okay, well, yep, we had Khalil Harrison. He was a rookie, first started playing, and he was a great player, fast. We could never get him to run. Yeah, still is. Couldn't get him to run fast, but sevens was the game he loved. And he actually wound up getting to score a try on national television for us in the last CRC that he played in with us.
Awesome.
But turned into refereeing. It turned out to be a great referee. Now, Lex, I knew Lex's mother, Sherry, from when she first moved to Fort Lauderdale. I've known, so watched Lex grow up, and he couldn't play rugby, but he used to come to a lot of our practices. He'd help us out, help us with law, because he's also a Florida graduate.
Yep.
As Haley was actually, she practiced with us a little bit before she started to referee.
Okay.
She was still trying to play. She actually did a few practices with us, and so we had a chance to get to know them all. Now, Chris Ream is also a former Gator.
Another Gator, yeah.
Here, but
referee factory.
But he played for Fort Lauderdale when I was coaching Fort Lauderdale. So, yeah, it's been great. That's probably the highlight of my career, is watching all these players involved as referees and coaches, because there's guys coaching or involved with club administration, that kind of stuff. That's what makes me feel. That's what's most rewarding about this time I've had.
No, for sure. And obviously you're still coaching the Gators now. Struggled a little bit over the last few years, because as you've seen with every team goes through that sort of cycle of up and down, and hopefully the Gators will be back on the national scene too. Now, on your resume, you obviously had all your coaching experiences on there. Now, one of the things I always encourage teams to do and players to do individually is go on tours, whether it's with their club or with an invitational team of some kind. Touring, as we'll have my dad on a little bit, he'll talk about that as well. One of the best things in rugby. What was your most favorite tour, and have you got any great stories? I know obviously you took the Lauderdale team to the Golden Oldies Festival as well, one of the best known old boys festivals in the world. But just talk about your touring experience and what it's meant to you as a coach and as a player.
Well, the first opportunity was back in 84, 85, whenever it was, with the Atlanta Renegades. We had 2 of our top players, Monty McCormick and Mac Miller, had moved up to Atlanta and played for the Atlanta Renegades, and they were going on this tour. So they called me up and decided to go for it with them, and turns out an old boy from Tennessee was on the tour that I hadn't seen or heard from since old days of Tennessee. But England, Scotland, Wales, we got to watch the Wales-France game at Cardiff Arms Park, the old park. And it was just awesome to watch, 20, 30, 40,000 people cheering for teams, and nobody on the field was getting paid a penny when you think about it. But the sportsmanship, it didn't matter who made a great play. Everybody cheered. The singing was awesome. And it was just, it just really hit home as far as how the sportsmanship and the camaraderie in rugby was. And that's what I try and explain to all of our young players, that right now, these guys that just 1 year, if you go anywhere in the world, you play rugby, you've got a network to set yourself up. The Golden Oldies tours, they were a lot of fun. And, there's 5,000. The first one we went to is Dublin. In fact, that's when I was in Dublin when I found out I didn't have a job anymore
oh dear.
Yep, I was in Ireland, and I found out, and I said, "Hey, I don't have a job anymore." So it turned into a true celebration.
I can imagine that was a night to remember.
Yeah, but they had all their fields. They had 34 fields set up at UCD, at the university, and it was just unbelievable with the 200 plus teams that were there, and we learned what. For those who don't know what Old Boys Festival Rugby is, the older you are, you wear different color shorts. If you wear red shorts, you're 60, you can grab them, but you can't take them to the ground. When you get to 70, you wear purple. You can't touch them, but you can get in their way. When they get to 80, they wear gold, and you can't do anything to stop them.
That's awesome.
And it was – we actually in New Zealand, when we played New Zealand, there was a guy in his purple shorts that said, we'll jog along with this guy. And that son of a gun took off sprinting down the way. And we found out that he was the world record holder at the time of sprinting in his age group of the 100-meter dash.
He probably never picked up a rugby ball in his life. They just probably said, look, nobody's going to catch you. Just take this ball and off you go.
Yeah, but no, it was great. To give you an idea of the social part of when we were in New Zealand, we played a team called the Nyaranga Bulls. And after our time was set, we rented these campers, and we were traveling through, and we went into Nyaranga, and we said, oh man, I wonder where these guys are. We found a kid on a bicycle and asked him if he knew where them. He said, yeah, follow me. He goes in, they made a phone call. Next thing you know, they opened up the clubhouse. All these people came in with their wives. They cooked us food. They started playing music. And it was we just showed up, and they took their time out of their lives to do that for us. I thought that was really telling. What
Golden
Oldies
about. Yeah, Golden Oldies Festival is exactly what rugby's all about. I haven't got to go to one yet. How much age you have to start to? Is it 50 or 40?
35.
Oh, 35. Yeah, there you go. So one of those bucket list things to do if you haven't been out to the Golden Oldies Festival. I think it's probably the biggest rugby festival in the world. Happens, I don't know if it's every year or every 2 years these days, but if you can check that out on the internet, there's plenty of videos and information out there. Talk about your coaching philosophy. Now, you've obviously coached adults, you've coached college kids. What would you say your coaching philosophy is?
Well, as Paul said, teaching is I've actually probably what helped me in my coaching strategy and philosophy was before I coached rugby, I used to coach women's softball.
Oh, okay.
Did that for quite a few years in Fort Lauderdale, that time when I was lost without rugby for 3 or 4 years.
Right.
And so I learned a lot about coaching people that didn't know anything about the game, and trying to teach the skills, and just not being the hard sell. You will do it this way. You will do it this way. And then when it comes to rugby, I was coaching people that knew rugby. When I first started coaching, I was coaching people that knew as much or more about rugby than me. But the biggest thing is to get everybody on the same page. And, Ronnie was talking last week or whenever it was about flair. I believe in the flair. You can you can try and coach, like you say, okay, we're going to do this a certain way and everybody's going to do it. But I keep going back to something Terry Day told me way back when. He said that football is a game of basically coaches and robots. The robots are told to do one certain thing, and it's basically the coach that you do exactly what they say, or else they don't do it. Everything's percentages. It's all about playing the percentages, and it really, to me, it kind of takes away from the fun of the game. And I've seen it happen a little bit even at the pro level in rugby, where they don't do off. There's teams that a few years ago we went to an advanced coaching course, and they said we don't do offloads anymore because the percentage is too low. So instead of working on making the offload a higher percentage, they say we're just not going to do it. We're just going to latch onto the ball and play that way. So then you just turn into the battering, and the game turns out not to be quite as fun for the players, in my opinion. So what I try and do is teach the tools, and then kind of let the players. When we had our successes, it was because the players were figuring out how we needed to play. Those years in Gainesville, University of Florida, first thing that would happen is we had a new player. I'll never forget Egg Salad, Brett Galrain. He would grab the players and said, "You guys need to know we're serious about this game. We are serious. So you come to practice, you come to play hard." And then these guys would go out and scout the videos. They would come back and say, "These are the kind of things we need to work on." And it was turning into, I wasn't really coaching. I was just like, yeah, well, that can work. And that's the way it works best. There's no way I can tell them, they're the ones that know what they're capable of and what they're not. So all I can do is help them grow and learn and figure out the strategies and say, okay, well, what about this? And we'll do that. And that's what I try and do. Not all players like that type of coaching. There's a lot of people that like the more directive type. But I try and do that, and then we'll play the game. I would love to be able for the guys to on their own, because once the game starts, coach can't do anything anyway, right?
Correct.
So the player needs to understand if you got a game plan and the team you're playing, that game plan doesn't work, they need to be able to make that adjustment. So try and teach all the options and try and get them to bring the options out. That's and I like to use all the players. I'm not a 10-man rugby player, 10-man team.
Well, whatever you're doing, Kenny, you've been doing it right. As you said, getting the players to have some fun. And once they're out there, the whistle blows, they're out on their own. You can have a quick chat with them at halftime and before the game. But one thing I've enjoyed watching Super Rugby from New Zealand is a little more of the wide open play and not the sort of, well, if we're in this position and it's this time in the game and the score is this, we must do this. There's been a little more flair and obviously some really exciting games this past weekend. I know you said you sort of took a bit of time away from the game when you moved to Fort Lauderdale, but is there going to be another time that you've sort of been close to walking away where it's been sort of just too much, or you've had an experience that left a bad taste in your mouth?
Oh yeah. I can name a few.
Other than that BA Baracus game. Yeah.
So when I was in Naples, actually is probably right before the year before I moved to Gainesville. I was kind of getting a little head guy saying, we need to work on plays more. We don't need to do basics. We know how to pass. We know well. They always say, everybody says they know how to pass, but watch them pass and catch, and you know it's a little different. So I talked to Larry Fox, and he had time on his hands, and I asked him. I said, I would like to try and start up a high school club, and asked him to be the head coach. And he said, no, you're the head coach. You have to do this. You stay with it. So I said, all right, but some things are going to have to change. And that's when, before we started that season, we brought everybody in, got the whiteboard out. Instead of the easel and marker, we got the whiteboard out this time and started talking about what is it you guys want and what's it going to take to get there. So we made sure, and that's something that I've really just came today to realize that's something that we have to do every season. I haven't done that the last couple of seasons. So we're not on the same page with leadership. but we did it. We did that. Rugby started being fun again. They understood why we were doing what we were doing. We made it to the playoffs that year. That was 2007. We made it to the South Championship, or to the South playoffs, and they had few. They kept going, and that was Division II. That was after moving up from Division III. So I was struggling with that, and you have your down times, and losing games. Losing games are frustrating, but that's not what determines whether I'm going to go for it. It's if the team loses, the players lose their desire, and it's real easy to blame it on the players, and that's what you start to do. Say, well, I've had several people tell me you can't want it more than the players, and my whole thing is if I want it more than the players, then I'm doing something wrong because I'm not getting them to the point that they want it. And that's what I keep re-evaluating. What do we have to do that? And I think the best way is just get them in the room at the same time and talk through it and figure out what is it you guys want. And if you want to win, but you don't want to beat up on high school kids by winning, if that's the way you want to win, then okay, we can do that. I'll schedule those games, but count me out as a coach, because if you're not trying to be the best, I'm not going to be there for you.
Yeah, and one thing. Go ahead, finish up.
No, go ahead. I'm done.
I was going to say the one thing I really hope that comes out of this pandemic break is that people, perhaps realize that was sort of, hum-ha about rugby, and that they realize how much they've missed it. And when they come back, whether it's a coach, whether it's a player, even referees, that they really put everything into this game and realize that you never know what's around the corner.
Yeah, that's true. Because I used to take a break over the summer when I was coaching Naples. They always went to go play sevens, and I just said, "Nah, sevens. I hate sevens. I'm not doing it."
Good man.
And then the first practice, I'd say, "Forget everything you learned about sevens. We're playing 15s now." And then lo and behold, I start coaching University of Florida, and then next thing you know, we're getting really big into the sevens and having some big successes there. So it was kind of fun having those the sevens runs too. But I kind of like what we've done with the Florida Collegiate Conference, sevens in the fall.
Yeah,
because it really gives us a chance to introduce the game to players, and it's a lot simpler game to teach and get them involved and get them hooked in the game where they can play, and then you get to break them into 15s, and hopefully you don't scare them off.
Well, the big boys certainly won't be scared. That's for sure. Well, before we get to the last couple of questions, let's bring in a couple of guests. One obviously we mentioned him a little earlier, a former Fort Lauderdale player, and now refereeing one of our sponsors this evening, Chris Ream. Chris, how are you this evening?
Hey, Chris, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How about you?
Good, great.
Look at that backdrop, Chris. Yeah. What a fancy house you have.
Yeah, thank you. It's I was on with Charlie earlier. We picked out this image from my green screen.
You're not supposed to tell anybody that.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to pop in and say hello, Kenny.
Yeah, Chris, talk a bit about your relationship with Kenny, going back with Fort Lauderdale, obviously, as well as being a fellow Gator.
I just know that I dropped out of college in 1981 and looked up rugby in the yellow pages, and there was Kenny's number. And I called him, and he's like, "Yeah, you know how to play? Yeah. Well, come on out. We're right at the beginning of a long season." And here it is 37 years later, and still season. I guess the season just ended because of this virus, huh?
Yeah. So Chris, one New Year's Eve, I think it was, he called me up and he said, "Hey, I got this guy from New Zealand needs a place to stay." Brought him over to my house. I said, "Well, okay, bring him over, but I'm getting Matt. I think Matt. I was getting ready to go to the Keys with Matt Rowe. We're heading to the Keys, but yeah, bring him over." And so, total stranger again. A thing about the rugby world, I trusted him, I guess. And sure enough, the house was still there, and everything was still there. He was still there when we came back, and played with us for quite a few years.
Yeah, I remember that guy. I had to get him out of my house. He had stayed with me for a week or so, and I had to dump him over at Kenny's, 29th Avenue, whatever that was, right?
He could eat. He could eat.
Yeah,
Well,
what a
you
great
hear-
house you had there, Ken.
Yeah.
Well, you hear somebody's from New Zealand and they want to play rugby, and you think, okay, you might be able to help out somewhere.
Yep. Well, my house was back in those days. My house was the processing center for anybody who came to Florida. Fort Lauderdale played rugby. They stayed at my house.
So that was just a little anecdote how I met Ken. But what you're just saying about the players have to want it more than you. I was coaching not high school, like middle school hockey, and I often saw the coaches caring about the game more than the kids. And I think that's a big deal these days. But like just as important is just how welcoming Ken was to me when I just called up out of the blue. And when new people show up at practice now, whether it's college or club or anywhere, high school, you got to make them feel welcome and introduce them around. And that's the only way we're ever going to grow the sport is if you got to make people feel part of the team, really, that they're contributing right from the first day, or they'll never come back.
For sure. Well, let's bring John Davenport in, former president of the union. It happens to be my dad. Chris, thanks for joining us. Thanks again for the sponsorship, and I'm sure we'll see you on another episode again soon here, down the road.
See you, Chris.
Good evening, Father. Talk about, you obviously worked with Kenny a little bit during your period as the president of the union. Talk a bit about what his legendary career and what he brought to the union.
Oh my God, a legend in his own lifetime. Hi, Kenny. How you doing, mate?
Good. How you doing, John? Good to see you.
I was trying to think when we first met, and I figured it was probably when I came over in '92. I was refereeing, so you were probably still coaching, and I certainly kind of come across you then. And I think, in various disguises, when I was helping coach FAU, we met UF, and then at Naples, obviously, because I would follow Boca, whatever I was doing those days. But I think the big help and the big introduction from Kenny was when he and Marquito, I think, conspired to elect me as president of Florida Rugby Union for what became 4 years. And I picked up a lot from Kenny and advice on how to do it. I probably was much less democratic than he was, but I had a good team. I had to pick a new team, and he was very helpful with that. And giving me I picked up the All Florida Day again in Orlando, which I think was great. It still is a great idea for rugby. We had the colleges there, we had the kids there. The select was always a bit of a test, but as you say,
right.
That was great to have a look at everybody over the weekend as a beginning and opening to the season. One of the great legacies. Well done, Ken. That was a good one. And then I think we crossed in South, USA South. Obviously, every Florida AGM I would go to one way or the other, either as a referee or a Boca guy, and he always had good words and advice to give me. We're very different people, but I didn't coach, and really I would help out in coaching, but I could hardly call myself a coach, hardly call myself a referee, but I did for a few years. They say in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. And sorry.
Yep, that's right.
I refereed till that unfortunate accident, and our paths crossed a lot. And I know Kenny loves sevens, by the way. I was laughing at that, Ken. I know how much you love sevens, and I'd occasionally intercede between him and Gary. And it was, but just a great man. And if there's ever going to be a Florida Rugby Hall of Fame, hope you're listening, Kerry, FRU, then this would be my first nomination. He should be right up there.
Well, there's no doubt about it. I think Charlie mentioned earlier before we got on the podcast that Kenny has to be, I would think, the only member of 3 rugby club Hall of Fames in Fort Lauderdale, Naples, and now the University of Florida. Is that correct, Kenny? I can't think of anybody else.
I don't know if they're in Florida, but I think may know of some. But yeah, been fortunate. Just like I said, I've been really fortunate to run into a bunch of great people at each club.
I mean, I thought I'd made small contributions to Florida Rugby, but I pale into the master. Yeah, I salute you, Kenny.
I think you're understating yourself, John.
Well, I hear they might be needing a president. If Kerry ever steps down, Dad, you can always jump on there again.
Get back again? Yeah. Well, it was a pity. I was laughing earlier on because he talked politely about being, but when I became the president, I said, how long was I going to be for? And they said, well, 2 years, and if you get re-elected, 2 more, and that's it. So I said, well, what's the history behind that? And they said, well, Bing made himself president for life, bless his heart. Which good intentions, which I think Kenny had to unpick, as I recall. Yeah, anyway, then it was Kenny followed by Mark E2, and then Mark handed over to me and myself to Franklin. So we passed the baton around. I must ask myself how Kerry's been president for 7 years. I must have missed that one. Great man, and always fun to be with. Great company, and like me, loves his tours and loves his social side of rugby as well.
And his Guinness, yes.
And absolutely, yes.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yes. He did destroy me once in a bar in Gainesville, I recall.
All right, well, thanks. Thanks for joining us, Dad. Appreciate the time.
Yeah, good to see you, Kenny, and much more success as long as you last, mate.
Thanks, John. Look forward to the next time I see you.
Okay, buddy. Take care.
Take care.
I think Charlie has a word from at least one more former Gator before I get to maybe a last couple of questions. Charlie, you want to fire that up?
Greetings, living legend and dear friend, Mr. Ken Simmons. This is your friend Todd coming from Mount Pleasant, Wisconsin, a sweltering 85-degree evening, wanting to thank you for the opportunity and privilege you afforded me by allowing me to join your coaching staff at the University of Florida, while my wife and I lived in Gainesville for the 6 years we did. You've had a large impact at the University of Tennessee, Naples, Fort Lauderdale, and the University of Florida, in addition to mentoring many other leaders who've gone on to be impactful at many other clubs across the country. You'd give everybody or anybody the shirt off your back anytime, including this shirt that you gave to me that literally says Coach Ken. It's one of my most prized possessions. You're a class act and a one of a kind, and I'm proud to call you my friend. Here's to you, Ken. Cheers.
Nice word there from Todd Street all the way out in Wisconsin. Good to hear from. I mean, I assume you hear a lot from your former Gators as the season goes on.
We do. It's the alumni weekend is always great because it's a chance to catch up. But hear from some once in a while. It's it's just like your friends. You don't hear from anybody for a while, but when you see them, it's just like you hadn't seen them. You were there yesterday. But yeah, Todd was a big help for us. He came and he is another really great coach that's a player's coach. And we were really lucky to have him the time that we had him here.
Awesome. Now you mentioned the BA Baracus loss earlier in the show, but is there any other games that you sort of remember over the others, whether it's wins or losses? And I also asked you sort of about any players that really stand out through your long 4 decades of coaching?
Oh gosh, so many. Well, I have to tell you about our game against Ohio. No, good grief, who was it? Columbus, Ohio.
That'll be Ohio State. Yep.
Yeah, it wasn't Columbus. It was in Bowling Green.
Oh, Bowling Green, yes.
Yeah. So this was the Elite Eight, and we had a team. We had our team there, and we lost the game by 3 points. And I can think of 3 coaching decisions that would have made a difference, along with many other opportunities we had. But we actually had 2 tries held up. 2 times we got into try zone and got held up.
Wow.
We had 2 opportunities to kick for a goal, but we were so into playing rugby, we didn't. We took a scrum. And that's probably the biggest mistake we made. And then I made 1 substitution I probably shouldn't have made. Pulled a player I shouldn't have pulled to change our attack a little bit. But all in all, it was really a great game. It was against a real loud, obnoxious crowd. And we lost by 3 points. It was a game that was it was a heartbreaker. But the next day we played Maryland, and I think we put we had played Maryland the day before, and we put 50 points on them. But it was good. We surprised the heck out of everybody because nobody knew who we were or how we were. So that was a real exciting game that we really enjoyed. I can name a couple of games back in Fort Lauderdale. I couldn't even tell you the details, but there were a couple of seasons we made it to the finals. Oh, one time against Boca. We were down by 2 tries. Maybe it was going to take at least 3 tries to win. We had maybe 5-10 minutes to go. And somebody said something that got our Tony Brooks. I don't know if you know Tony. He went to Life after he played with us, but got him so fired up that we came back and we scored 3 tries to win the game to go on to the next level. And, those are the games that that's when you know you have a team. When you can come from behind, you don't lose, you just fight to the end and make it to that final play. And even in that Bowling Green game, this team was fighting to the end. We just had an unfortunate pass that we probably, if we could have kept going, I think we'd have scored no problem. As far as players go, Lucas Bostroki, who you've heard of,
yeah,
we had one. He came to us skinny kid. You can see he's not a skinny kid anymore.
I remember. Right? Yeah, I remember you playing high school down here.
Right. Yeah, we met him. His dad had called up, and he came to All Florida Day to watch us play when he was still in high school. And that was back when we beat UCF the first 2 Florida Cups before the years before they went on to the national championships. But they were getting better each year. I could see that they were gonna go all the way eventually. But Lucas joined us. He was just a workhorse. Brett Stubbs, a leader, and he was doing great things with Palm Beach. I don't know if he's still playing now, but
yeah, the last game I reffed, he was playing in.
Okay, but he's a leader there. He's just these are players that just don't give up no matter what, and that's the trait I try and instill in the players, that you just don't know how many games you can win. When you think about how many tries you can score in a matter of 2 or 3 minutes, the game's never over till that final whistle blows. And if you give up before then you've lost. Back in Fort Lauderdale days, oh my gosh, we had so you heard that Paul joined us because of a woman in Fort Lauderdale.
Right.
We also had Tim Ford came and played with Gloucester. And then a few months later, he decided to come play in Fort Lauderdale. Well, he married a girl named Sandy. And we gave her an award for being our best recruiter that year. But Tim had a chance to play for Scotland. And his dad was pretty upset with him, from what I recall. Was not real happy about the fact that he gave up his opportunity to play nationally to come to Fort Lauderdale. Well, he got a chance to play for the ERU against Scotland. So he got his opportunity to play in the big leagues. And he was a great asset to our club. And I could just go on and on with the number of players, because that run we had, we probably had 2 of the best back lines. Our A and B back lines were better than most than any team in Florida, and most teams in the Eastern. We'd come in first and second, or they'd meet in sevens tournaments that year. We'd come first or second, and we'd run into each other at the semis, and not one would knock the other one out. But if I was to tell you the names of the B players, you would just be amazed who we had that. Because we had the Knights and the Crusaders, where we actually had to enter 2. We entered 2 different divisions. We had our A team play an A and a B game, and our Crusaders would play 1 game in the Division II of Florida back in those days.
Awesome. And my final question, I know it's a tough one because out of 40 years, it's a lot to remember. But what sort of aspect of your career has given you the most pleasure? I know you said teaching players and hearing from them and seeing them go on to further success. Is that your most pleasing? Yes,
I'll say it's watching, and especially I see it more in college rugby than I did at coaching the men's. It's watching boys become men. We'll get these kids that have never done anything physical in their lives, or just awkward. And with rugby being such a inclusive sport, we don't chase, and in clubs we're not allowed to kick anybody off the team. We can't have tryouts. They're clubs. They join the club. They play. And of course, no matter how much playing time you get. But when you see these kids, these players that start off really awkward, don't look like they're going to get it, and by the time they graduate, they've actually, a lot of them have turned into some really good rugby players. And it's just very satisfying, very gratifying to see them grow up.
Yeah, no doubt. I know Coach John Cawthray, who just passed away a couple of years ago. That was his big thing. There are a lot of players that have come through him at Boak, and that was the big thing. They always said that as a coach, he turned them into men via the game of rugby. And I think you've done that to many players, both at the college level and at the senior level as well. Well, Kenny, we appreciate your time spending with us here. We've been here, I think, almost an hour and a half. Charlie, any final words from you?
No, I'm pretty sure we're going to have him back because he, whatever we do regarding the Florida rugby history, he's going to be involved. So you're going to be back. I really appreciate being here.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. I really appreciate the kind words that you've put out there, and just go rugby, keep with it, never give up.
That's right. We appreciate everybody tuning in. Obviously, thanks to our sponsors, UK Real Fire Barbecues at realfirebbq.com, and obviously Chris Ream, thelifeinsuranceguy.com. We'll be back with you next Sunday with episode 9. We'll be focusing on our club, one of the more successful clubs, especially over the last decade in Florida rugby. I won't give you a hint too much yet. We'll let Charlie promote that when we get that out in the next couple of days. But again, thanks, Kenny, once again for joining us, Charlie, all the work behind the scenes, and everybody else for joining in. Don't forget, you can always catch up with any episodes of TFRO on rugbyfl.com/TFRO, and the podcast is available on all major podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc. So thanks again for joining us. Thanks, Kenny. It's been an hour and a half of fun. We'll see you guys next week. Cheers.
Go Gators.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Go Gators.